Well, the legislation went before Tynwald in July, so, and you are correct, they are now live. We have another 9 marine nature reserves, and they are as a result of our commitment to global marine nature reserves, and we committed to designate 10% of our territorial sea to reserves by 2020. So we've actually overachieved, which I'm pleased about. We now have 10.4% of our territorial sea as nature reserves. Doesn't mean total restrictions on fishing and other activities. Some people see this as a retrograde move, but no, it's not. It's to protect important species and habitats, as well as facilitate fishing and commercial activity around regenerating fish stocks, etc. So it's a good move in the right direction, and it certainly plays to our biosphere and membership as well.
Because that's an interesting point. I mean, how much does the island's biosphere status depend on having these sort of marine reserves?
Well, it doesn't. At the end of the day, we got our status for what we are, but we sign up to sort of improve over a 10-year period, and this plays to that agenda. But there's no obligation to do this sort of activity. It just adds to the overall mass of things that we do, and we did sign up to a global commitment by 2020, which is separate from Biosphere. So it's all part and parcel of improving our environment generally, and although you can't see the marine environment, it's very important to us.
Now, this the addition of the extra 9 reserves, marine nature reserves, comes off the back of the first one, which was set up in Ramsey in 2011. What kind of success rate have you had with that? What kind of what's come out of that in itself?
Well, I think it's been very successful, and it certainly has been a beacon, not just for us when we're looking at what we're doing for the future, but also for other jurisdictions. There's been great work between the environmentalists and the fishermen with reduced catches or targeted catches. So both parties have earned something from this and learnt something from it, and in fact the scallop catches in that area have improved with careful management because the overall environment has improved. Recreational fishing as well goes on there, and the species on the ground, as it were, on the seabed, the habitat has improved quite dramatically. So it's a win-win situation, and certainly rolling that out over the rest of our territorial sea seems like the logical thing to do.
And you say it's not completely restrictive. What kind of response have you had from fishermen to the rolling out of all these new marine nature reserves? I mean, it will have an impact on what they do.
Well, we have gone out to consultation, and we haven't drawn a line under all commercial fishing. Potting still goes on. Static gear can be used in these zones. Mobile gear is more problematical at the moment. It is not allowed. But these areas will regenerate stock. Generally, they're a good place for juveniles to mature, and I think that will spread out to the sea that is not affected by the marine reserves. I mean, as an aside, we designate closed areas for fishing routinely, particularly with the scallops, to now allow regeneration. So this helps that process, and most of the designation is within the inland water inside the 3-mile limit. So we now have about 50% of our inside the 3-mile limit designated, but they are generally areas of high ecological value, and there's not so much of a conflict with commercial fishing.
How much is this about marine biodiversity and conservation, and how much is it about, like you say, a more practical measure of restocking the waters outside of these areas?
It's both. They go hand in hand. You know, there are species within these zones, areas, which will benefit from the protection from mobile fishing gear, and that helps regenerate stock. It's not about regenerating stock, it's about biodiversity and the ecology of the areas concerned, but the spin-off from that is it's a win-win situation for both parties.
And are there any other areas you would consider designating as marine reserves, or is this it basically?
At the moment, we're working with the UK authorities as an area that they are looking at designating that impinges on our territorial sea, and that may be something for the future. But at the moment, we've met our targets, and we will carefully monitor what these reserve areas do for the ecology of the seabed and fish stocks, and we'll see how that works out with the commercial fishermen. We don't want to disadvantage our fishermen, but we want sustainable fisheries as well as good ecology and environments around the island.
And how is its progress monitored, and I suppose more importantly, how is it policed?
Well, it comes under the Wildlife Act, and it can be policed. There are penalties if you contravene what is in essence a marine nature reserve with prohibited activity. At the same time, we do monitor it. We have a good fisheries eco team who monitor it physically on the ground by sampling and looking at what's going on. So yes, we do know what's going on, and Ramsey Bay is a good example. We've observed great improvements in the habitat there, as well as I said earlier, improved scallop catches for the fishermen.
And this goes hand in hand with the recently launched Blue Waves Trails, which is a way of encouraging the public to explore the island's coastline. I mean, have you had much take up on that? Have you had any feedback on that level?
Yes, I think we've got 3 trails now, which are a really good idea. They're early days, but I think there will be more take up. I think people are utilising those trails and taking the information on board, and I think that's the sort of thing we want: community engagement in our marine environment and coastline.